The book is Beyond the Big Lie. Look, PolitiFact, when did you create PolitiFact?
2007.
And
so right before the 2008 election.
And the idea is it's sort of a repository of fact checkers for political speech. How did you decide what would be included in what you would decide to check?
Sure. So the whole idea is to answer people's curiosity. If you hear a politician make a statement and you wonder, is that true? Those are the things that PolitiFact checks. I mean, and ultimately, that's what journalism is all about, to answer people's curiosity. If they're wondering what's true and what's not, that's what PolitiFact fact checks.
And you had ratings. It was true, false, or partly false, false, and pants on fire.
And pants on fire. And that was, fact-checking had been around before PolitiFact.
Yes.
But what distinguished PolitiFact was the truthometer, which rated things, as you said. And we did...
The technological advance of a truthometer.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we did win a Pulitzer Prize.
Really? For pants on fire?
It sounds funny when you put it that way, but the reason is that there's solid journalism behind it.
Right.
And it's so important. And I think that people realize that even back then, politics was getting complicated, and people were really beginning to wonder what was true, and PolitiFact and other fact checkers filled that void in an important way.
Now, this is all, in some ways, you might look back on it and think, oh, how quaint. We went through an analog and we would talk about whether it was partly true or true, and we created a truthometer. And then social media comes along and it turns into this digital misinformation age where they talk about, a lie travels 8 times faster than the truth. How have you adapted, and what do you think is the kind of fact-checking mechanism, if you think it's important in that way, that can adapt to that moment?
Well, I think what you're alluding to is the original truthometer used vacuum tubes. And
yes.
that was a problem.
And by the way, truthometer, for those of you at home, that is copyrighted. Don't think you can't just put up your own truthometer or truthometer, as I incorrectly called it earlier.
But you're very right. I mean, the fact-checking has struggled to keep up with the many ways that politicians and others spread lies. And in the book, what I talk about is, and the point of the book is to explore how and why politicians lie. And one of the things that I get at is that they're doing it in lots of different places that fact checkers are struggling to keep up with. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it with these huge megaphones that fact checkers can't, with their current staffing, adapt to.
Right.
So
with malice aforethought, as they might say on court TV, this isn't happenstance. Misinformation has been weaponized.
Absolutely.
To a large extent in this digital age.
Absolutely. And, we're seeing it in North Carolina with the hurricane, as you alluded to earlier. But fact checkers have to get more assertive in how they respond and think more digitally. One of the things that
Does that mean AI? Like, when you say think more digitally, are you talking about taking this, making it less bespoke, and creating kind of AI context overlays for these types of things?
So that's one way. So I think the atomic unit of fact-checking, I think, will be, for the foreseeable future,
You're creating your own metric system over here. The atomic unit of fact-checking.
I think humans will be needed to create fact checks. We hear what's wrong, we need to research it, we need to respond to it. But yes, AI can be used to spread it more efficiently to broader audiences.
And to be more responsive.
So 2 ways that we've done that at Duke. We worked with the
Duke?
Duke University?
Oh, I've heard it's a safety school. I've heard very, very, very poor things.
So 2 things we've done with our team at Duke is to, we worked with the tech companies to create a standard so that fact checkers could label their fact checks. It's called claim review, And it allows them, when they publish something, to put this tag on so that tech companies, search engines, social media platforms can find
like a good
those.
housekeeping seal to some extent.
It's really what it is like a street sign that says this is a fact check on this person on this claim, and claim review helps find that fact check if you're Google, so that Google can then say, oh, here's a fact check and could use it in powerful ways. So that's one way.
And keeps the information from being, let's say, laundered throughout the internet, which is oftentimes what happens. People lose attribution.
Potentially. I can't speak for Google, but that's something they could do.
Right.
But now here's another way that we're excited about. We call it half-baked pizza. So the idea, so...
I'm just going to stop right here. This is Duke University we're talking about.
Well,
this isn't just like Duke's fact-checking lab and pet repository. Like,
well, it's
half-baked pizza index.
It's a safety school.
Fair enough.
But let me tell you about half-baked pizza. So what we want to do, so fact checkers have a problem in the United States. There are not enough fact checkers in many, many states. We studied this and we found huge, what we call fact deserts, places where governors, members of Congress are never fact checked. They can say anything they want and they're never held responsible.
Right. Those are called the 24-hour cable news networks.
So how can we hold them responsible? So often they repeat the same talking points in Arizona that are being fact-checked in Florida. So can we use AI to monitor what they're saying in Arizona and duplicate a fact check from Florida using generative AI, but adapt it to the claim in Florida? So we've been experimenting with that. Why do we call it half-baked pizza?
Please, I was going to ask that.
The idea is that if you have a claim that's been done, say, by PolitiFact, you need to review it by a human editor. So I think of that like half-baked pizza. The chef looks at that pizza that's not quite ready to go in the oven and says, yep, the pepperonis are in the right place, there's enough cheese, yeah, it's got enough sauce. Okay, the half-baked pizza is ready to go in the oven. So that's our product. We're trying to get funding for it. We think it could be the answer.
Let me ask you a question. When you came up with this, had you had lunch that day? But this gets us, all right, so this gets us to the larger point. All right, so we've got this idea of fact-checking, but I think the public, solid fact-checking, objective fact-checking, that has to be an earned trust with an audience, right? Because we really are in a balance of it's misinformation, but then it's also the First Amendment and censorship. You know, the government, for instance, and you tell this story in the book, Nina Jankowicz, who was hired by the Department of Homeland Security to run a kind of operation within the government that can examine misinformation, generally coming from foreign sources and other things. They ended up calling it, what did they call it?
The Disinformation Governance Board, the worst name any government agency's ever been given.
So it does, the name itself conjures up Orwellian bureaucratic standards. The right gets a hold of that, tweets it out. 48 hours later, the whole thing is blown to shreds. So it shows how difficult it is for even this idea of creating that mechanism to take hold in a country where misinformation is weaponized for partisan purposes.
Sure.
So how do you balance that?
So let's be clear about, I focus on Nina Jankowicz for several reasons. One, I wanted to show someone who was victimized by lying. Here's someone whose life was turned upside down because of these lies, who faced death threats, who had trouble getting work afterward.
And the speed of which it went from Twitter, somebody tweeted it out, to the right-wing mainstream media thing, and people were brutal to her.
Yes.
Brutal.
Now, it's important to point out, this organization was an internal working group that was designed to coordinate what the Department of Homeland Security agencies did to combat disinformation. It was not out to do the things that the liars said about it. So
it was not there. The purpose was not to then contact Facebook and Twitter and say, you must remove this. We don't agree with it.
Correct. But the reason that there's so much misunderstanding about this group is that the government, the Biden administration, did a terrible job explaining what it was supposed to do. And so the story...
Well, they hung her out to dry.
They did. And the story of Nina is really a really depressing story, although it has moments of humor in it, about how Washington works and doesn't work. So it's sort of the backbone of the book, because I felt like I got so caught up in Nina's story because it reveals so many things about lying and how Washington works. Now,
does it show the limits of fact-checking? Because in the story, look, Department of Homeland Security said don't say anything, and so they let this thing go until it built up a kind of, event horizon situation, and it was all blown up. But when Maria Ressa says something like a lie travels 8 times faster than the truth, doesn't that mean the truth has to work 9 or 10 times harder? Doesn't this mean that to battle misinformation, you have to do it in a way with a tenacity and a clarity of, sort of a moral foundation that is kind of unyielding? And they don't do that at all, because let's face facts, the government often bends the truth for their benefit and their own propaganda.
So in this case, there were no fact checks done, or there was one.
Right.
I do think, the government is a culprit here in this case, and it's very sad to watch how the government doesn't do anything. But I think in combating misinformation and disinformation, the government needs to step up and be upfront about facts. And this is something, I've been an aviation reporter in the past. I've been a political reporter in the past. I've seen plenty of instances when government does a good job telling its story, when it's honest, when it's transparent. And one of the best things that government can do is tell us when it does not know something. Be honest with us.
Boy, do they not do that well. I wonder, what do you think? COVID is a great example. So as we play this all out, we talk about misinformation and trying to counter it and the weaponization of it. But when the government, as you said, doesn't know something, but come out with certainty, 100% safe and effective, if you don't do that, everybody dies. And when that is shown, when the misinformation that they say is misinformation turns out to be maybe not misinformation, maybe information. I'm not saying in every case. How badly does that damage their ability to make any case vociferously? And does that make it impossible for the government to have that responsibility at all? Isn't that kind of the crux of why they can put up maybe some guardrails, but can they really be adjudicators of misinformation?
Well, one, I don't think they should be an adjudicator of misinformation. I think they should just tell us what they know and what they don't know. And often it takes courage for people and entities to say, we're not sure. And a classic example this week is the hurricane. Like, for the National Hurricane Center to say, well, here's where we think it's going to go. But, we're not positive. That's always been built into hurricane predictions. And I think that same uncertainty should be reflected in other things the government does. And I think they have either gone silent on us with things, or they have just or they have shown certainty when they're really not. And I think that really harms their credibility. And as a fact checker, there's nothing worse than getting information from the government that you later find is not accurate.
Right. Yeah, and that can take the whole thing. So when we look at the big lie and how it's been weaponized so effectively, you write more by the right than by the left. You've taken criticism because you fact check more people on the right, or you say they lie more.
Yes.
And better.
They're very good at it.
Yes.
Yes.
But you've done I mean, it's in here. There's a statistical analysis.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I did for the book was look at fact checks by PolitiFact and by the Washington Post fact checker, and then talk to, I think the most revealing thing was when I talked to Republican politicians and said, why does your party lie more? And it was really revealing. The answers.
Wait. You just said, like, hey, why do you guys lie more? And they're like, good question, Bill.
Yeah.
There's something deeply wrong with us.
Yeah. Well, these are, for the most part, people who have left the Republican Party and who will acknowledge this truth. But you know, they have a partisan media that not only looks the other way when they lie, but echoes their lies and often has a business model built upon their lies. And so you begin with that. Then you have a culture in the Republican Party that many people told me goes back to, many people put it with Newt Gingrich as sort of the turning point.
Really?
That Newt Gingrich sort of changed the culture of the Republican Party and changed it into a sort of anything goes. Hey, if we're going to win, let's, you know, you can change the facts.
By any means necessary.
Yes.
Right.
And that culture took hold. Now, some people date it earlier.
Yeah, I'd go to Nixon on that.
And Roger.
And Roger Ailes.
And I was just going to say, and Roger Ailes.
And maybe money's not even the point. You know, Roger Ailes, who was the founder of Fox News, very famously said during Watergate, I'm going to create an apparatus so that what the left did to Nixon, they viewed any sort of press as the left, what they did to Nixon, you can never again do to another Republican candidate or president, and quite frankly, I think has been successful.
And you know, combine all those things,
yeah,
and you have a recipe for lying and support for lying that has just become a culture.
Now, are you suggesting the left doesn't lie or doesn't weaponize it to the point where it's as effective?
I am. There's definitely a substantial amount of lying from the left,
sure,
but nowhere near as much as from the right.
I've gotten, if I may, I've gotten a couple of pants on fires from you over the years. Like literal pants on fires, like not even like slightly untrue. Like there was one where I think the tagline was, this motherfucker lying. I think it said on it. It's a terrible situation for me. I went home that night, shamed.
But see, okay, there's the difference.
And I would have accepted that from an Ivy League school. But from Duke, sir, at long last, beyond the big lie. It's a fascinating look on misinformation. Please get it. October 15th, available for pre-order. Bill Adair.